Yeah, so I was actually born in New Zealand. My parents lived in New Zealand for 10 years. They were both Americans. They actually met on a ship on the way to New Zealand back in 1969. Back then, you didn't jump on an 11-hour flight from California. You took a month-long cruise and it stopped in different places. And my dad actually had a visa to go to what was then Rhodesia, and my mom was the first female zoologist in the Southern Hemisphere. She graduated with a degree from Davis and was going to go into either veterinary or zoology. And one of her professors said, "Hey, was a Kiwi," and he's like, "I can get you a job at the zoo in Wellington if you'd like." And she said, "Sure, I'll try." I just took a giant leap of faith. And so anyway, my brother and I were both born there. My middle name is Ellesmere. I was born next to Lake Ellesmere. So that's how I got stuck with Mike E. My whole life.
Mike E.
And
Wait a second. My Oh, it's not Mikey, it's Mike E.
well, I mean, it's Mikey, but yeah, that's just if you were like in class, everybody was like, "Oh, Mike E. Wier," and so whatever, it got shortened to Mikey, and I got stuck with that one. I didn't really have a choice in that matter. And yeah, I never really liked Mike, so I was always Mikey or Michael, or these days friends call me Miko. And um yeah, so yeah, middle name's Ellesmere, born next to Lake Ellesmere. I don't know how deep you want to get, but my parents lived right on the Rakaia River in New Zealand. And just total funny side story. I was at SRF 2 years ago, which has the conference I just came from, the Salmon Restoration Federation conference, where all the fish heads from the West Coast get together and talk fisheries restoration, give presentations. And one of the presentations I was listening to was they're trying to reintroduce winter run Chinook from the McCloud River back into the McCloud River. So this is above Shasta Dam. And so when they were looking through Livingston Stone's journal, the guy that started the first hatchery on the McCloud River, so hence the McCloud River rainbow is the most prolific invasive freshwater species on the planet based on the number of places they've been taken and transplanted. So almost every rainbow you catch in another country was either an Eagle Lake rainbow or a McCloud River rainbow. And so all the spotty ones with the red side, like you catch in New Zealand and Australia, were McCloud River rainbows. And so they started that hatchery to send salmon eggs to the East Coast because our salmon populations were already crashing on the East Coast. And then at some point they figured out that rainbow trout eggs transport better. And so they started sending rainbows all over the place, and they were, doing great. And so they found in his journal that they had transplanted some McCloud fish to New Zealand. And the main population of salmon that took hold were winter run Chinook from the McCloud River on the east coast of the South Island of New Zealand. And they ran in the river behind my house. And I was listening to this guy's presentation, and there was actually a Maori tribal elder there and a couple representatives from the tribe, because at the time the Winneman Wintun tribe here in California was working with the Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, to try to work on this reintroduction. And I started thinking about it. I was like, wait, my dad used to catch those salmon. My mom was always giving him a hard time because he was a crappy fisherman. But every once in a while, he'd get one. And I looked through my phone. I found a picture of my dad standing there on the banks of the Rakaia holding a 25-pound chrome bright winter run Chinook. And, at the end of the presentation, I told the guy's like, dude, that's awesome. Those are the fish. Can I start using that for my presentation? And so, yeah, random side story about New Zealand. But, you know, world's getting smaller, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, I don't think you realize just how close to home that is because those Chinook have consumed me for over a decade now. And I've just recently started really focusing on catching them successfully. And they are. It's just like being on the West Coast. And it's funny because when I was speaking to Fish and Game about it or Fisheries about it, we were talking about the McCloud River. So yes,
That's
all of
awesome.
all of this checks out. Unfortunately, those 25, 35, 40-pound Chinook are no longer. I mean, they're just rare. So the sizes are getting substantially smaller. Are you finding that in your region as well?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in California, the sizes are getting the average size of both steelhead and salmon's getting driven down substantially. I look at these. I'm kind of a bit of a history buff when it comes to fisheries too, so I'm always looking at the any info I can find. And the according to the old canning records from the early 1800s, it's kind of the best fisheries data we have to go off here in California. I mean, the average adult Chinook was like 80 to 100 pounds
Hmm.
before the gold rush, and kind of like what you're seeing in southern Chile there people are catching those huge Chinooks, and it's like, making the rounds on social media and this and that. But like that was the average fish in California for a long time. And then when I was a kid, we're still seeing a lot of 40, 50 pounders, 5 to 7 year old fish. These days, yeah, the average I see in the river here, I get Chinook salmon right in my front yard here, and average is like 15 to, well, 12 to 15 is kind of the average. And then every once in a while you'll see a fish up to 35. Rare occasion if you see one, 40 pounder would be like, oh man. But the average fish are, yeah, really like 8 to 15 these days.
Ew, what do you think it is? Do you think it's the whole old school genetic argument? Is it that they're just not being able to live as long as they used to? Why do you think they're getting smaller? Just as a side topic here.
There's a number of reasons. I mean, fishing pressure, pressure from predators. Here pinnipeds play a big role in our salmonid, predation in the ocean and in the estuary. And the bigger the fish are, the easier it is for the sea lions to grab them. And then also through different types of fishing pressure, different nets, smaller fish can get through certain types of nets easier, and so that kind of drives the population size down. And then loss of habitat, they just don't have the capacity to get that big. It's not genetically in their favor to get that big anymore because they're trying to, evade predators, and they're trying to get to different habitats that can't, an 80-pound Chinook trying to spawn in the type of flows we got in the Central Valley these days. It's just not beneficial to them. It's the smaller ones kind of thrive in the tributaries they have access to, and there isn't as much main stem spawning as there used to be. So, there was an 86 pounder pulled out of Battle Creek, and it was just a carcass that was found. And that was, I think, like 2006 or something like that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Back to you. So fishing. And why did they come back to America? Why did you guys leave New Zealand?
You know, they just describe New Zealand as being kind of just a straight road. Not much happens. You kind of can see your future unfold in front of you when you live in a rural area in New Zealand like that. And so they basically moved back to America just for more opportunity for my brother and I. Um, yeah, and then they moved to one of the most rural counties in California, so it wasn't that much of an upgrade. But my dad kind of liked that country living, and so yeah, I think just their time in New Zealand kind of ran their course. I want to be closer to family to raise us, and yeah, I think just more opportunity.
And so obviously that's where your fishing started, I suppose.
Not really. We left New Zealand when I was about 2,
Okay.
so
But I
most of
mean,
my
your parents, did your parents get you into fishing?
Um, my dad fished a little bit. He took us fishing more than he fished himself. It was mostly my grandpa that really like was a fisherman and, was a legit fisherman, and really taught me how to fish. My dad liked to go to the spots where fish live. He loved backpacking, and he loved spending time at the lakes and swimming and going to the river and going out on the boat. Um, but he wasn't exactly a great fisherman himself.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
I grew up kind of out in the countryside in California, and there was a lot of farm ponds that within walking distance of the house. So my dad's idea of fishing is he would go to the fridge, open it up, kind of see what was in there, be like, well, cheese, I like cheese. I bet fish will like cheese too. And oh, we got some bacon. Everybody likes bacon, so we'll grab some bacon. And once we got a little more advanced, I talked him into buying some marshmallows to float it off the bottom, kind of thing. And it worked. Yeah, we were fishing for bass and crappie and perch and catfish, and all those species ate bacon and cheese and whatever else you threw at them. So it was great. But when I started fishing for trout and fishing for more picky fish, yeah, that wasn't really gonna cut it
No
anymore.
doubt. And how did that all come to be? How did you start to figure out fly fishing?
Through the bass ponds in the neighborhood. I mean, that was a big part of my early fishing experience. I just spent a lot of time down at these bass ponds. We were kind of just feral kids. Both my parents worked full time, so we, had time after school to go scrunge around the neighborhood. And more often than not, that ended, we ended up at the pond. And so one of my neighbors taught me how to fish rubber worms with the ponds are, picture reeds around the sides and weedy and, big willows hanging over in spots and lots of blackberry bushes where they're sharp. And so there's only a few places you kind of get to the pond from the shore. It's mucky and you're mucking around in the mud. And so one of my neighbors taught me how to fish. I forget what style it is, Texas rig or Louisiana rig or something, but with just basically just a rubber worm, rigged weedless, no weight, and just throw it out there. And you just watch the curls and the monofilament just slowly dip under the surface, one after the other, and you just think would slowly sink. And you see the line just sink, and then you see a little twitch and set the hook, we'd be reeling in these 3 to 5 or 6 pound bass and just spending time down there. Sometimes I'd see the bass jumping out of the water at damselflies and dragonflies that were hovering around the reeds or even sitting on the reeds. These bass would jump out and launch an attack on them. And I just thought, man, that is so cool. And so the only place to buy fishing tackle in the entire county where I lived was Kmart, which was just like a big box store in the 80s, and I remember being in Kmart and looking around the fishing section and I saw a fly tying kit, like this super janky fly tying kit, but it had some blue feathers in it. One of those like vices that screw onto the desk
Oh
and
yeah.
some janky old tools. And I thought, well, that's the same color blue as those damselflies. I was pretty crafty as a kid. I was like, I bet I could make a damselfly out of that. And so sure enough, I did. And then went down to the pond with my spinning rod and tried to throw that thing out there and didn't go anywhere. I'm like, I might have to get one of those whippy fly rods now and try to get this thing out on the water. And so, because otherwise you had to put a split shot on or something, defeated the purpose of having a floating fly. I just couldn't, what I used to do with it was just lean it over the reeds and just dap it on the water. And that actually worked
Yeah.
great. Fish would just come out and mug that thing, but you couldn't really cast it out beyond that. So it was like Tenkara with a spinning rod and a janky Kmart damselfly with, tied out of some old parrot feathers or something. And then, but my mom worked at a zoo. My mom worked at, when we moved back to California, she worked at a zoo in California. And so I had access to all kinds of crazy fly tying materials as a kid. My mom would bring me home flamingo feathers and scarlet macaw feathers and polar bear hair. And, I'd get to go, they had like an aviary with just all the birds, like an atrium, just a big bird hotel in the zoo, and I just get to go in there and just clean up feathers. And so I was pretty well set up on strange materials when I was a kid.
Yeah, this is really cool. Okay, so enter trout and not steal it. Enter trout.
Well, my first child experiences were definitely with grandpa.
Okay.
He lived, my mom's dad lived on the coast in a place called Marin County, kind of north of San Francisco in the Bay Area. And there's a little stream that kind of flowed through the neighborhood, and just kind of a little trickle of a stream, and you wouldn't really what you'd think of as trout and steelhead habitat, but it had connectivity to the bay, and it had a nice little population of wild trout. And so we used to go down there and fish. I got it hanging in my garage still, but my grandpa just had a cane rod. There was just one straight piece of bamboo, and it had a line just long enough that it could go from the top of the bamboo, and just he had it just set up perfect. So you hook the hook in the bottom of the cane rod. So when you're walking with it, it was just, say a 9 foot piece of bamboo and a 9 foot piece of monofilament tied to it with a hook on the end, and then just a single split shot. And we'd get whatever kind of bait. And it was mostly dap fishing too. The fish hid under these root balls, these big California bay trees, and she'd kind of climb out over the tree somewhere and just dip some bait up under the root ball, and you never knew if a big crawdad was going to come out and grab it or a little trout was going to shoot out and get it. Um, and that's kind of where I learned like about entomology too, because it wasn't that Grandpa was, really trying to teach us the fundamentals of what trout ate. It was more that he was just cheap. And so he'd same kind of deal with my dad. But he'd walk out in the yard and be like, "Oh, you can dig up some earthworms over there. And, oh, if you go over there, there's probably a cricket under those boards. And if we go out in the field, there's some grasshoppers." And then we get down to the river and sometimes you have a little butterfly net or something. And we flip over some rocks and find a hellgrammite or a stonefly or a caddis under there. And, so that was our bait. That was a big part of fishing is you had to forage for bait and then you could go fishing.
Yeah, okay. I love this. Okay, and then at this point in your life, how old are you, do you think?
Yeah, that was well, I really started bass fishing at probably 5, 6, 7. Tying those first flies was probably 7 or 8. Um, Definitely catching trout by the time I was like 6 or 7 with grandpa.
Okay. Did you have any
Yeah.
aspiration at this point to work in the outdoors, especially given that your mom worked in, but was she working in the zoo?
Yeah, she started as a zookeeper. Worked her way up to curator of the zoo. So she was there for 27 years at that
Wow.
particular zoo. And yeah, I knew I wanted to do something with nature, with wildlife. My brother went to college and became a wildlife biologist. I was on track to kind of go that same route. I was going to be get into fisheries though, become a fisheries biologist, and then I moved to Tahoe to finish junior college, and my life got pretty well hijacked by snowboarding and ended up getting sponsored for snowboarding. And, you know, 20 years went by in Tahoe and never made it to finish my degree. But now I get paid to get an education in fisheries conservation. So it's great.
You do. You've got a good gig, which we'll talk about. But the snowboarding thing, that was how I learned about you, was you were this, and this was a long time ago, but you were this snowboarding guy. I always thought you were like a pro. I don't know if you were, but in my head, you were a snowboarding pro who I can't remember at the time if you were making films or in films, but you were this snowboarding guy who fished and it was super cool. And it was at the time when all the really cool snowboarding videos were coming out. And we had envisioned that such a thing might happen with fly fishing, but of course it was poo-pooed and scoffed at and we were told that would be very bad for fly fishing. Let's talk a little bit about that entire part of your life, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I guess I've always been like true to my hobbies because I, in addition to when I was a kid, all through my young adulthood, I loved skateboarding, fishing, and I guess back then collecting baseball cards and doing art. I've always been into art, drawing, and writing, and some different forms of art. But skateboarding and fishing and art have kind of been like a through line in my life. And skateboarding kind of turned into snowboarding as I got older. I grew up skiing. My dad was a big skier. He was from Colorado, and he was actually a badass skier. He lived at Breckenridge before he had a cabin at Breck before he moved to New Zealand, and kept skiing in New Zealand. That was one of the reasons he moved to Amador County because there was a good ski hill, not too far away. And so I was basically raised at Kirkwood, which was an amazing mountain. And then in the 90s, people started snowboarding. And of course, I was a skateboarder and I wanted to try snowboarding. And my dad was like, no way, snowboarding's a fad. Nobody's going to be snowboarding in a couple of years. I'll buy you skis and that's it. And so I didn't get to start snowboarding until I was like 17 and, could afford to buy my own snowboard and had a car to get to the mountain and do it myself. But I had that foundation from skateboarding. So, I mean, and skiing. So as soon as I jumped on a snowboard, I was, just on. I was catching airs the first day and, busting tricks by the afternoon kind of thing. And so, yeah, fast forward moving to Tahoe and I kind of had some aspirations of trying to get sponsored for skateboarding when I was younger. I really like skating but it's hard on your body and it's just a tough scene. And so for me, snowboarding kind of felt like a bit of a cop out, to be honest with you. It's like, oh, it's strapped to your feet. You just, jump and it's there with you. You don't even have to like ollie and keep your board under your feet and stuff like that. And but you could go a lot bigger. In some ways, the consequences were less because you weren't falling on concrete, but in other ways, the consequences were a lot greater because you were going a lot bigger when you jumped off of something. On skateboard, if you were 5 feet in the air and landed on some concrete, that's a pretty big air. On snowboards, we were launching 40-foot cliffs, and
Ooh.
stuff like that. So it was different. Yeah, just kind of like raise the stakes a little bit. And then yeah, I got a job pretty early in Tahoe. I figured my program out pretty much my first year that I got a job at a fishing shop in the summer and got a job at Kirkwood in the winter. And I got a job working in the snowboard park at Kirkwood. So I was uh, designing and maintaining the jumps. In the mornings we go put up the fences and groom the jumps and make sure everything looked good, and then spend most of the afternoon just riding out there, sessioning with people and kind of setting the pace for the park, and also making sure people didn't get hurt. I got my EMT after a couple years of doing it because I'd see so many people get just wrecked on our giant kickers, so I was kind of the first on scene. So got my EMT just to be able to help people out. And yeah, so just out, just riding the park like I did. And I was kind of just a hometown kid. I didn't have the resources to really travel as much back then. I was just working for, you know, pretty much minimum wage at Kirkwood, and but I got to snowboard all day. And then yeah, like I just remember riding the park one day, and then a guy like kind of stopped me at the bottom of the chairlift, and he's like, "Hey man, I saw you hitting those jumps, like this and that. Like, you know, I work for Oxygen. You want to try this board?" And I was like, "Oh no, man, I can't afford another snowboard. I got one. This one's I haven't broken it yet. Like I'm good." And he's like, "No, no, no. I want you to take it, man, and like just try it out and tell me what you think." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure." And that led into getting sponsored by them. And then, a year or two into it, went pro with them, and um, got to spend a season doing kind of the endless winter thing, rode Kirkwood and did all the competitions around Tahoe, and then went to Mount Hood and trained for a couple weeks, and then went straight to New Zealand and did all the competitions in New Zealand for a whole season, traveling around NZ, and then straight back to Kirkwood. And uh, yeah, that was yeah, good times. And then yeah, just spiraled from there. Got super lucky. I'm sponsored by some of the best companies in the world, in my opinion. But so just to back up a little bit, Oxygen was like kind of just this. They were actually it was actually owned by Atomic Skis, and back then skiers and snowboarders still there was like that whole like
The rift,
you
yep.
know rift apparently between them, which was mostly just made up for marketing. But anyway, so when Atomic produced snowboards, they produced them under this brand called Oxygen. And when I was, it's like late 90s, I guess. And so I was just thinking, oh yeah, this kind of funky brand made by skiers. Their big like marketing thing was, oh, made by a robot arm in a factory in Austria. I mean, they're high quality, but it's just not a lot of soul to it. And so I was like kind of just whatever. Like when I went pro with Oxygen, it wasn't like I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, this B brand. And then, but when I went to New Zealand, they were like one of the biggest brands in New Zealand. So in New Zealand, everybody's like, oh my God, you ride for Oxygen, awesome, mate. It's like this, they were like a big deal over there. But then the next year, I got sponsored by Quicksilver, and then Quicksilver bought Mervin Manufacturing, which is LibTech, and GNU, or bought into them, and so they put me on LibTech, which was like my favorite snowboard company in the world. So next thing you know, I'm riding for LibTech and Vans and Quicksilver and a few others, and was never like the top dude by any means, but for I was like the regional pro. I was like the Tahoe guy. Started as rep rider, and kind of made it onto the B team, but I was never in the like league with, even like E-Jack and T-Rice and those dudes who were like doing it. But I got lucky. I got to, yeah, got got to snowboard all the time and got hooked up and got made enough money to pay the rent. And, it was always just the snowboard industry is always just like teases you just enough to keep you going, but it's never like it's pretty tough to like come ahead in that scene for sure.
What about fishing though? You were obviously fishing at the time. How did you start to brand yourself in the fishing industry? Where did that enter the mix?
Well, I guess yeah, I mean, it really started with the videos, I guess. I started guiding pretty early in. I think I got my first job at a fishing shop at like 18, my first summer in Tahoe. And then it was kind of a all around tackle shop. They did like guiding on the lake, like mostly trolling and jigging for Mackinac and rainbows and browns on Tahoe. And wasn't really a fly fishing thing. They had a little bit of fly fishing gear, but yeah, I worked there for a summer and then well, yeah, that summer I met a kid in my small business planning class who his name was Justin Ray, amazing angler. Back then, I mean, this dude was him and Kyle Giampali were the dudes in Tahoe and South Tahoe. They were like the light years ahead of everybody else when it came to fly fishing back then. You know, I was still wearing my like Hodgman's neoprene waders and had to like fiberglass rod that I made, you know, still rocking my old fiberglass Fenwick. And I think by then I had a couple graphite rods too, but you know, my setup was like because I really just taught myself how to fly fish realistically. Like there was no, you know, looking at magazines and stuff. There was no internet back then. There was no, I
Yeah.
didn't really know anybody else that did it. I just kind of started fly fishing and there was nobody in Amador County that fly fished. And until I got to high school and a couple of my high school teachers fly fish. We actually started the Amador Fly Fishers, which is still a club in Amador County. Um, but yeah, anyway, fast forward to I'm sitting in my class and I'm doodling on one of my books and I just happen to be drawing a mayfly sitting on the surface of the water and a big brown trout coming up under it, you know, about to eat this thing. And this kid walked by in my class and just happened to look down. I was always doodling on something, you know, like I said, I like drawing and doing art. And he's like, oh, it's a cool picture. You know, what are you into fly fishing or something? I was like, yeah, you know, I like fly fishing and this and that. And so we kind of hit it off and started chatting a little bit in class. And, you know, a couple or few weeks into it, he's like, hey, I'm going to the East Walker this weekend. You want to go? I was like, sure. And so we're literally driving out. It's like one of my favorite rivers, you know, the East Walker is like the holy grail of brown trout fishing when I was a kid on the West Coast. And, you know, all the old timers talked about it. And so, and I'd only been there a few times myself and talked my dad and stopping there one time on a road trip when I was like 12 maybe. And then I drove there once when I was 16 when I finally got a car, made a little trip over there. And anyway, we're driving out there and I'm like, so what are you taking that small business planning class for? And he's like, well, I'm a fishing guide and I want to branch off and start my own business. I'm working for someone now, but I want to start doing my own thing. I was like, well, that's cool. What's a fly fishing guide? You know? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I take people fly fishing. You know, in my mind, I grew up in freaking Amador County. Your dad or your grandpa taught you how to fish, you know, like paying an adult as an adult to like teach you how to fish just wasn't even a concept that was in my mind. Like my high school career counselor didn't tell me that a fly fishing guide was a job, you know. So
Yeah.
it just didn't click. You know, I didn't grow up like I said with the internet. You didn't grow up watching YouTube videos about fly fishing. So it was just like it was like a revelation. I was like, adults pay you just to take them out and go fly fishing all day. Like, how much do you make? And he's like, oh, you know, full days are like 350, $400. I was like, dude, really? My buddies are all rafting guides making 65, $70 a day. You know, if you get a $5 or $10 tip, you're like stoked and you're like risking people's lives all day in like class five whitewater. So I'm like, this is sounding pretty good. You get to hang out on the river all day. You get paid $400 a day. You're just like tying on flies and chucking stuff out there. Like, how hook me up, dude? How do I get in there? And so we went fishing. He's like, oh, dude, you're actually a pretty good fisherman. Like, you want a job at the fly shop? And I was like, yeah. He literally took me there like the next week and got me a job at the fly shop. And yeah, and that was that. And so the next year I went to guide school, got my guide license, and then it just became the classic scenario of guiding in the summer, getting through the shoulder season in Tahoe, snowboarding all winter. And honestly, back then I was so addicted to snowboarding. Snowboarding was my life. And summer was just some literal bullshit I had to do to get back to winter again, you know, it's just like, ugh. And now I'm like the total opposite. I'm like, God, I gotta put my shoes back on. It's getting cold again. Ugh.
Yeah.
But
It's what's called getting older.
back then we lived for winter and for snowboarding and but anyway, fly fishing was a great way to make a little money in Tahoe in the summer. And short season, viable guiding season, like 3 months a year. Maybe if you get a few trips in May, and then you'd be busy June, July, August, and then things would start tapering off into September. By October, it's pretty much, dead zone up there for guiding until you'd go back to banging nails or whatever other little odd jobs you could find to get back through till winter again. And then, the scenario kind of you talked about, we'd spend all fall watching snowboard videos, getting hyped. Back then it was like YouTube wasn't a thing. Like you were waiting for that latest VHS tape to come out, and it's like everybody spent all year filming a video part, and then the videos would release in the fall, and you'd all go to the premiere, and it was just this big fun atmosphere, and everybody's just fired up, and you get stoked for the season. And yeah, there was no like self promotion in snowboarding back then. Like someone had to like take notice of you and like want to waste their slide film or their 16 millimeter film on, shooting you snowboarding. There was no like, get out your cell phone, your buddy takes a shot of you, it's on Instagram 5 minutes later, counting your likes. It was just totally different scene back then. And so we'd get so fired up on those snowboard videos, and then we'd get the latest VHS and then DVD. And those, we used to just wear those tapes out just like our old skate videos. We just wear those things out on repeat in the old VHS player. And so yeah, it's something, and then spring would hit, and we'd be sitting around the fly shop board. Um and we're all Tahoe kids. We're like watching Lonnie Waller and Doug Swisher, and the old 3M videos. And sure you've seen some of those, and thinking, we should make a fly fishing video. And so we did. Yeah, I bought an old, just like, you know, high eight digital camera with little like tapes you put in it. This is even before like the mini DV tapes. So it was like this kind of big size tape and camera, and started just shooting guides day off. We'd go, fishing. We gotta go scout some water. So we'd basically just go fishing, and started filming it. And then we started just doing little skits because we grew up watching, the Bones Brigade and Endless Summer, and they were always just goofing around, and in these skateboard videos and surf videos. And so yeah, we put together a little fly fishing movie. And the first one, I didn't even like, I did some market research by basically just asking my clients if they had a DVD player, and most of them were like, "Oh no, I got a VHS player, but I don't have a DVD player." And so Fisheye One, I released the first run on VHS because I didn't think that the fly fishing market was ready for DVDs yet.
You
And
released your first film on VHS? Oh,
yeah,
I missed this. Wait, so which what was your first film then?
this was in
Fishing film.
2000. It was Fisheye One. So it was like, in my mind, I was trying to do like 411 video magazine was like a thing for skateboarding. I was like, I'm gonna make a fly fishing video magazine. It's just gonna be like a compilation of, just random fly fishing stories. And we didn't think much of it. And so I think I printed 250 of them on VHS tapes, and was just, selling to my clients. We just have it playing in the shop, and people would come in the shop and be like, dude, that is awesome. What is that? And then it was Jamie Lyle, who was like super rep at the time. He was our Sage rep and Sims rep. And he came in and saw it playing. He's like, this is great. Who did this? I was like, oh, me and John and, the guys. And he's like, you put this together, it's great. Like, we gotta get you sponsored. And so that's what kind of spiraled. The same kind of thing. We were like looking, actively looking for sponsors. It just Jamie came in the shop and saw it and was like, this is great. We want to sponsor you. And so then it kind of just spiraled from there, and yeah, made the next one. And then I think I was working on Fisheye 3 when I met the dudes from that became the eventually became the AEG crew with Ryan Davey and Chris Owens and Brian Jill. And we planned that Patagonia trip that year.
This is how I first heard of you, was the fish bum stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. That made it out there in a lot of ways. Let's see, and I guess it was 99. I did 4 months in New Zealand. So I went and competed at snowboarding. That was a year I kind of technically went pro at snowboarding or whatever. And the next year, what did I do? I spent 4 months traveling. Was that the year I went to Africa? I think I went to South Africa for 4 months with my dad and my best friend. And then we came back and I started thinking about Africa and I was like, man, that would be a cool fly fishing video. Nobody's ever seen fly fishing in Africa. And so I started like compiling some resources and saving my money from a guide season. And then that's my brother actually met Ryan in Tasmania. He was backpacking around Tasmania and somehow ran into Ryan. They start, shooting the shit about fishing and somehow, it comes up that his brother's a fly my brother's talking me up as being a fly fishing guide, making these fly fishing videos and this and that. And so and then my brother's like, yeah, this guy's planning on going to Patagonia. You guys, maybe you can tag along with him and make a fly fishing video down there. And so one thing led to another. We invited him down to Southern Oregon where my brother lives and spent a few days showing him around and fishing. And we kind of kicked it over. And yeah, one thing led to another. Next thing I'm flying to Buenos Aires to go on a 4 month road trip with two guys I had never met before and one guy that, I've talked to for a couple days that my brother met in Tasmania. So that was just kind of how things were rolling at that stage of life. We're just kind of going for it. And yeah, one thing led to the next and we ended up producing Trout Bum Diaries 1, which was an experience,
Yeah.
the trip was one thing, the business side of it was another whole nother thing. But yeah, got through that. And then that's kind of what was the catalyst into the fly fishing film tour too. We were like, we need to do like more of like a Warren Miller style thing, because I was always typing up how hyped our snowboard premieres were in Tahoe. And that's how much everything everybody looked forward to. And like, why don't we do something like that for fishing? And so the first thing we did was throw like kind of a big outdoor party where we first premiered the video in southern Washington there, on the banks of a river and campground, just kind of like a little like party thing. Threw up a projector and then we're like that kind of was hitting. We got to do more of that. And then so that kind of started the fly fishing film tour. And shortly after, kind of had a falling out with those guys, but yeah, that's kind of how that basically started the fly fishing film tour after that.
I love all this. All the pieces are coming together now. Um, you still had your own production company though. Was it, were you Burl? You're Burl, right?
Burl Productions, yeah.
Yeah. So were you Burl Productions before
Oh yeah.
going?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just
Yeah.
maintained that after.
Yeah, I'd already been producing films for yeah, a couple years before I met them. When I met them, I mean, none of those guys had ever even held a video camera in their hands. I kind of, led them through that process. And then at one point we decided to, form this company together. And so it was kind of like a collaboration between Burl Productions and Angling Exploration Group is what they were calling themselves at the time, and or what basically we formed in Argentina. And yeah, but I always kind of maintained my, that was just a collaborative project, but I always had my company and maintained my other little projects there.
Yeah, I always saw you as that. Now talk to me about when we met. So how long after all of that did you and I meet?
Yeah, gosh. So that was we met probably so after so at, well after that. So I think that trip was 2002, 2 into 3. And then I that was kind of the catalyst that led to me wanting to do the first Soulfish movie.
Yes, 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 yes. Soulfish.
So
That's
that
sorry,
was
it's all coming back to me now.
yeah, Soulfish was I grew up watching like Bruce Brown and like the Endless Summer. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna make the Endless Summer of fly fishing. I'm gonna do like an around the world fly fishing movie. And I mean, I'm a kid in my mid 20s in Tahoe with no budget, just a dream, and like scraping by, working for just peanuts at Kirkwood in the winter, getting a few bucks here and there for other snowboard promo stuff, guiding in the summers. I'd make most of my money those few good months of the summer guiding, and then I'd take what I made and take another fishing trip. And so Soulfish was like just working all the connections, and God, we went to Mongolia again. I was doing these Team USA fishing tournaments at the time. One of my roommates and my roommate at the time from Tahoe and I were traveling around, and we went to one in Colorado, and we're after the tournament, we're sitting in a parking lot of a hotel in Boulder, Colorado, and we were just done with the tournament. We were loading our wet waders and gear in the back of my old Toyota and getting ready to head back to Tahoe. And some guy is with his girlfriend walking his dog, and they walk by, and he literally like looks at the back of my truck and sees my rods and stuff. And he's like, it's like, oh, what are you guys into fly fishing? And I was kind of like being snark. I'm like, yeah, what gave it away? The 10 fly rods, the waders, the boots, like he's like, yeah, I do a little fly fishing too. And, kind of just waiting for the normal questions. Oh, what did you catch? And how big were they? But instead he's like, yeah, last couple of years I've been going to Mongolia. You ever seen a taiman? And I was like, dude, I
Ah.
saw a picture of a taiman in like Field and Stream, probably one of those very first like Vermilion Brothers trips. They had published a photo of one of those big taimen. And I was just like, yeah, and so we started talking about Mongolia, and in my mind, I'm like, cool, you're rich, that's awesome, like I'm not, I'm gonna go back to my guide job, like
Oh
thanks for your
God.
cool fish stories, but that year, Will Blair, who was from California, used to do these best of Kamchatka trips. He saw my videos. He invited me to come to Kamchatka, so I was going to be the first to go to Kamchatka and film fly fishing in Kamchatka. So I bought a ticket and had it all lined up, and then I had already had this idea for the Soulfish movie going. So I was on a trip to Christmas Island with Rachel Andros. We shot this amazing part. I'm just come home back then, like checking my messages on my answering machine at home, and there's one from Will Blair. Hey, Mikey, man, I got bad news. The flight to from Anchorage to Petrolia got canceled this year, so I'm gonna have to reschedule the Kamchatka trip. I'm really sorry, buddy, and couple messages later, it's that guy from Boulder, Colorado. I was like, hey man, this is Peter Mullet. I had a couple people back out of my Mongolia trip. I got a couple spots open. Like, I tell you what, if you want to just come film, like come on down and hang out, just buy a ticket. And I got my refund from my Kamchatka ticket. It was the same price for a ticket to Mongolia. So there I am flying to Mongolia to meet a dude I talked to in a parking lot for 10 minutes in Boulder, Colorado. We ended up having a crazy trip. I went to Brazil with Andy Burke. Went to the Florida Keys with that guy Justin Ray, who kind of got me into guiding from Tahoe. He had moved on to Montana for a few years, and then he was down guiding at the Florida Keys by then, and doing really well with that. And so, we kind of filmed this movie, and again, just shoestring budget, just me and a camcorder, and going on these trips and making it happen. And my whole business plan back then was make this movie and then sell DVDs. That's how you got paid. That was the business model back then. You made a movie, sold enough DVDs to fund the next trip. And so I think we met around that time, probably through Patagonia,
Ah, yeah.
and yeah, one thing led to another. We ended up on that BC trip with you and I and Eric Jackson,
It's
who was one of
awesome.
my buddies from Tahoe. And that was really fun. Yeah.
It
Next
was
thing I know,
so
we're in
much
a
fun.
hotel in Terrace, British
In a
Columbia, and
single room with what did we do? We had the cot between the two beds.
yeah,
So it was me,
yeah,
you, and Ejek all lined up. Feels like it's 100 years ago.
yeah. Show up Terrace like, oh, we got to hit the liquor store.
Yeah.
Gotta, yeah, see how we can get hooked up, and just goofing around in a hotel room for a few days and catching steelhead. That was fun.
We did get fish though. It was good. You know what's funny about that is I actually forgot that we filmed that. I remember the trip, but I forgot that we were filming. So you must be doing your job well because I don't remember you being in our faces at all.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of my style back then, is just to let things, it's very documentary, on trips like that, just kind of staying back and letting things unfold how they did, and just filming, and then coming back and seeing what story I had to tell out of it, get some interviews, get some sound bites. Wasn't doing a lot of like engineering, scenes back then. It's more, you know, get there, get to the spots, and let it kind of just unfold organically how it did.
Yeah. How did
I
the
think
in Go ahead.
you guys had done a trip earlier that year too, right? Where you went in September and filmed with Nick or someone,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
just
Yep.
got
Yep.
some amazing like dead drift, dry fly footage for beautiful steelhead coming up and you chomping on like size 10 royal humpies or something. I don't know. You guys were
It
catching some
was a
beautiful
it was a
fish.
really good year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot
And
about
then we
that.
got there, of course, it started raining and it was a little
Yeah.
tougher.
Who
But
organized that? Did you organize that? I can't remember how that all came to fruition.
yeah, I kind of just last minute, yeah, worked it out and can't remember if did you one of us jumped on super last minute. I can't remember if it was you or Eric, but someone was like one of two of us were kind of had it figured out, and then one person's just like, hey, we're going to BC like this week. I can't remember if that was
Probably
either you
you.
or
I
Eric,
think
but
you
someone
guys
jumped
had it
on super
figured
last
out. I
minute.
think I came on last minute.
Yeah. You're like, oh, I can move some stuff around. Sure, I'll be there.
That meant I
Uh,
will be telling the casino that I'm sick because I worked at the
yeah.
casino at that time.
Oh, that's classic. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
oh,
Dustin. Really, that I guess that came about because I met Dustin at the at one of the fishing shows, and he
yes,
invited me
of
up there.
course, right? Because they were at Nicholas Dean, but we didn't
Yeah,
stay with. Well, we didn't stay there, but they guided us, or we went
yeah.
out with Dustin because we weren't allowed to. How was that? I'm trying to remember how that worked.
And
I,
Sky, who was just like the fishiest dude ever
yes,
back then.
Sasquatch. I think that's the other reason. I was a licensed guide, and a licensed guide is not allowed to fish on a classified water with a non-resident. And teaming up with those guys solved all that. Plus, it was fun. They had some great access.
Yeah, I wasn't used to those kind of rules, I was just so used to like taking for granted our public land here in California. And we have stream access laws where you're allowed to be below high water mark on all navigable water and basically tons and tons of public water in California. And, so yeah, I remember that kind of throwing me off. Like, wait, non-residents can only fish certain days unless you're with a guide and you got to do all this special stuff. And which, yeah, looking back, I think it's great that people are actively managing their fisheries a little better than we are here. We're kind of just a absolute free for all in this state. So yeah,
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it still. It's controversial. And
yeah,
actually they've taken a lot of the rules in Canada and applied them to fisheries in New Zealand, which has been
yeah.
interesting to navigate. But back to you though in the industry, how was the industry as a whole reacting to you coming at everything or at media specifically with a cutting edge feel? You had that snowboard vibe in your videos. How did everyone react to that?
I mean, it was definitely overwhelmingly positive. Yeah, back then was that's what kept me going. It was just such a great response. So many people saw those videos and were just so stoked on them. And it did. It turned into a ton of great opportunities and different sponsorships and different trips, that I got invited on. A lot of that just kind of happened from going to the fishing shows and we'd make little video premieres at a bar after the show or something like that. And inevitably someone would come up to me and be like, "Hey, I'm so and so, and I got this lodge somewhere, and you should come check it out." And back then my life was a little more just yeah, kind of cruisy, and it was a lot easier to say yeah, and just jump on a plane and fly somewhere. And so yeah, that BC segment was in Soulfish 2, which was the follow-up to Soulfish 1. And at the time, like I said, I think I'm making like the endless summer of fly fishing movies. I think they were a little ahead of their time. And I'm also just not a great like marketing person. I've always just been more like the creative person. I really enjoyed producing the content. And then most of the time, by the time I'm done with it, I'm so sick of hearing that song or hearing those sound bites or, I never want to see those movies again. I just like, please, someone do something with this. And back then, it was just there was yeah, there's a lot of opportunities floating around out there, and was able to get some licensing deals to, you know, online distribution and stuff like that eventually. By the time Soulfish 2 came out, they were starting to get some like streaming services and places to get your stuff sold online. The DVD market was already fading by that time, 2008, 9, 10. And yeah, it was just a great era and a great a time to just get to explore, and it was before like the boom of social media and self-promotion and yeah, it was great. It's great.
Yeah,
It's a
you
great
kind of
time.
caught the tail end of it. When did you decide that this whole free and easy life, even though you still, like we were talking about earlier, you still have your life in your van and you still have a free and easy life in a lot of ways, but you also have a full-time job. So how did that all come to be?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in conservation, and there definitely comes a time when, in my 20s when it was about snowboarding and those early fishing meetings, like, yeah, look at me, look at me, look at me do this sick trick, or look at, and and then it was just all about like check out my friends, it was always about like trying to amplify the people around me, like all the years of being sponsored and stuff. It's like every time something came to the house, it was like the, 50% rule or more. I just give half of it away like immediately to whoever was around. It's like, oh, cool, I got a box from the sponsors. Like, here, take some of this, and I'll take some too. And it's always been a circle of giving. This energy exchange. It's never been about like, oh, me, 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 mine. I got to get mine. It was like always bringing up everybody around you. To me, that's was like what um kind of how I looked at finances and just in life in general. If you're coming up, bring those up around you. And so it was just kind of this spiral of, hooking people up and getting hooked up and just kind of making it happen, and but I'd always been interested in conservation. And so you kind of reach that point where it's not like, look at us fishing. It's like, how can I do something more meaningful to help these places? That's really what's special is these animals and these places we're going. And, it comes to a point where it's not about us doing this. It's about this opportunity that's here for people like us to take advantage of, these resources. And so I started making little environmental stories. I did one, the first one I think I did was for my home river, the McCalmy River. And at the time, I was working with a local watershed group, and they were trying to get a wild and scenic designation passed for our river. There was the threats of a new dam looming, and they want well, they wanted to expand an existing dam, which was going to flood like some of the best last riverside riparian habitat in this area, and this like critical habitat for local wildlife. And so we were pushing back against that. And I'm like, you know what you guys need? You need a video to help tell this story. I mean, they're already doing great work. And so I basically volunteered to do it. And a couple of the nonprofits pitched in a little bit of money and, but mostly I just made this video, and it helped. It really helped in the campaign. It helped get the word out there. And we were able to pretty quickly stop that proposed expansion of that dam and save this stretch of river. And a lot of people credited the video and playing a big part in that campaign. And then eventually that group was able to secure the wild and scenic designation too, and just through a lot of hard work by a lot of people. But I saw the video played a role in that, and that was kind of where I was at with guiding too. Is just all those years of guiding. It's kind of like the writing was on the wall. I could see the direction our fisheries were heading. Every year, just more and more people fly fishing's not like some sports where the more people that get into it, the more facilities you can build to do it. All of a sudden there's a huge boom in skateboarding. You can build a sick indoor skate park. You can build another skate park in every town. Fly fishing, you're not building new rivers. The best thing you can do is what our Department of Fish and Wildlife's been doing for 100 years, just grow fish in tanks and chuck them in rivers, and that's the solution, to growing. But that's not natural. It's not
Sustainable.
self-sustaining. And so I wanted to try to do something to kind of help our fisheries, our wild fish, the fish that I really cherished. And that's kind of the true natural heritage of California. It's a salmon and steelhead producing ecosystem. We had one of the greatest diversities of native trout of any other state in the lower 48. We had huge amounts of abundance of salmon and steelhead, and a lot of that was on a pretty clear decline. And so I kind of wanted to switch my focus to conservation. So I made that movie about the McCallum, and that really helped. And then I did a couple of videos with Trout Unlimited in my area. One of my good buddies was working for Trout Unlimited at the time. And then And I was also getting just kind of burnt out on the fishing industry. I think there was a lot of like stuff getting thrown at me for a while there, and you know how the fishing industry is. I mean, just a lot of people want stuff from you for nothing, you know. It's like everything's like it's like a charity thing, which is great, and I love doing that, but you know, it's also like I gotta make a living somehow, you know. So was doing a lot of pro bono environmental film stuff and volunteering at different places, and I'm still trying to guide a little bit and do all that. And I was getting a little burnout, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna get a little back to the roots a little bit more. And so I actually took a few years and made an eco sports, like kind of an action sports movie with an eco twist to it. Some of my friends in Tahoe made the first human powered snowboard movie where it was just all split boarding, you know, no snowmobiles, no chairlifts, no helicopters. And that was kind of the catalyst that became Jeremy Jones's quest that turned into his human powered snowboard movie Drive. It did deeper, further, and was it deeper, higher, further? Anyway, you know, so I was trying to take that a little step further and do like a multi-sport eco sports movie. So each month was a different sport, and it kind of followed the season. So went from winter to spring to summer to fall and back to winter. So it started with snowboarding, and EJack had a part in there, and Jeremy Jones had a great part, and we were all just split boarding, and then you know into spring and the snow starts melting and we're whitewater kayaking, and then rafting, and then fly fishing, and then skateboarding, kiteboarding, surfing, into the fall, snow skating, and then ended with a rad ski part. And so it was all multi-sports. It was like a human powered movie. And so I bought my first van, and I was going to go take that movie on tour. It was narrated by Scott Gaffney, had, you know, a bunch of the pros from each sport from around here. And I was going to do this big thing where we do like these premieres, you know, these showings, but it would be like incorporate art, incorporate music. So like the movie was just part of it. And then we'd also had a band play, and we'd have people doing art or bringing their art to display, you know, different kind of things. And I was going to do like a whole tour around the West Coast. And around the same time, I was still, you know, hustling with my production company and just doing little commercial, whatever gigs I could get back then. You know, I was doing commercials for fishing lodges and, you know, little destination videos and little brand videos and just, you know, snagging stuff. And I was at one of the fishing shows and just happened to walk by the California Trout booth, and was stopped and was chatting with the executive director at the time, and was like, hey man, you guys are doing all this awesome science-based work, but I don't feel like you're getting your message out to the public like you could be, you know, like you're doing this great work, and I'm not like your average person just has no idea. They're not hearing about it unless you're, you know, deeply embedded in a membership and really paying attention. Like, how about we do a couple videos? And the guy's like, hey, I've seen your fishing videos. I know who you are. And it's like, let me think about this. And so he calls me a week later and he's like, you want a full-time job? When can you start? You know, kind of deal. And I was like, well, let's go fishing and we'll talk about it. And so he came up to the Truckee and we caught some fish and chatted about it. And yeah, ended up jumping in with CalTrout. And so here we are 13 years later. I've been working for them full time, in various forms. And it's great for me because I get to still be creative and produce media. I don't have to sell it at the end. I don't have to sell myself. I don't have to, you know, I mean, I do help a lot with marketing and branding and stuff, but I don't have to like sell myself or try to like sell a product. You know, it's just telling environmental stories. And, you know, I can proudly say that the media produced has helped raise millions of dollars for conservation in California and beyond. And so to me, it's, you know, a great form of, again, just that reciprocal energy. You know, I'm getting to give back to these resources that have given me so much. And at the same time, it's sustaining me and, you know, and my lifestyle and allowing me to um, continue to be out on the water and out on the rivers and out on the lakes and yeah, do something that's fulfilling and meaningful.
What's their main focus right now?
For California Trout, for us,
Yeah. Yeah.
we are statewide coldwater Fisheries, Coldwater Ecosystems Conservation Organization. CalTrout was started in the late 60s, early 70s as an angling advocacy group. They did the first ever wild trout project in California. This is the first time that anyone did a project that specifically managed for wild trout and self-sustaining, and it was a huge success. The fishing was killer. It was on Hat Creek. And then they got into protecting rivers, passing wild and scenic. They got the wild and scenic legislation passed in California that created the first wild and scenic rivers system within our state, which was building off the back of the Federal Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. And then they stopped a major dam on the Eel River, which was an important fishery back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Like a lot of those fly fishing for steelhead techniques were kind of invented by that crew. If you've ever seen the rivers of a lost coast and kind of
Oh
that
my
whole,
gosh, so good. So good.
so good.
Yep.
Like, that whole like, you know, era in history, the Russ Chatham and Bill Shat and that kind of lore. And so there was a proposed dam on the Eel River in the early 70s, and the founder of CalTrout at the time really helped stop that. And then they got, basically the entire Smith River protected. And then they were the first fishing group ever to intervene in a FERC relicensing process, the Federal Energy Regulatory Committee. That's the body that governs all dams and licensing for dams. So there was a stretch of the Pitt River that at the time was completely empty. They were just diverting water in a penstock around the river and into another powerhouse. And he intervened in the FERC relicensing, got that stretch of the Pitt River re-watered. Now that is one of the best wild trout fisheries in all of California. Um, and so we're still kind of building off that body of work, but we do everything from large scale restoration. We're just coming off the heels of the largest dam removal and river restoration project in history. Removed 4 main stem dams on the Klamath River, opening up like 400 miles of historic habitat to salmon and steelhead. So it's kind of still in the process. The dams were just taken out in 2024. CalTrout had been working on that for 25 years. I've been part of it for the better part of 13 years now. And we got several more dams in the hopper. These are deadbeat dams, not dams that are still functioning and still providing the resources that they were meant to provide to society. All dams have a lifespan, so these are dams that are either completely silted up, have lost their carrying capacity, are dangerous for various reasons, or were just the economics just didn't line up anymore. So PG&E, so the dams on the Klamath were owned by a company called Pacific Corp, and they just made a financial decision that they couldn't afford to retrofit those dams to current earthquake standards and fish passage, and or just keep maintaining them for a 9-watt hydro project that just wasn't, contributing to their overall portfolio. And same with PG&E, they've really had to reevaluate their portfolio. So they walked away from 3 different dam licenses in the last few years: Butte Creek, Battle Creek, and the Eel River. Those are all really important habitats for native salmonids. And so the big one on the chopping block right now is the eel. It's a really contentious project because that particular dam does still have a functioning reservoir. There's 2 dams. One is just a check dam that diverts water into a penstock, goes through a mile-long tunnel through a hillside, and actually comes out into the Russian River drainage. So they take water from the Eel River, pipe it through a pipe into the Russian River, and generate power at the far side of that. That water now helps sustain dozens, of vineyards and tons of agricultural interest there. So that water, they wanted to keep diverting it, but those dams, the generation of power and maintain that infrastructure wasn't financially feasible for PG&E anymore. So they're walking away from that. But there's a lot of people that love that reservoir and want it to stay. And so there's a lot of local opposition. And same with the Klamath, there was a good amount of local opposition from it. But again, it's just a decision being made by a private company in a free market economy. It's that's the decision they're making. So,
Are
but of
you
course, environmental groups are supporting them on that and trying to figure out the best ways to help rebuild the ecosystem afterwards and the best, path forward for all the stakeholders involved. And so we play a big role in that, and really being kind of a mediator and among different groups and helping just solve problems. And We also have a legislative arm in Sacramento, so we do a lot of lobbying for different bills that benefit fish. We have a science arm, so we conduct a lot of our own science. We work with universities, have partnerships, and then we do a lot of our own science. So writing reports on everything from springs to underground aquifers to monitoring fish populations to stopping the spread of invasive species. Um, we got a lot of stuff going on. California's a big state, and CalTrout has grown a lot in the time that I've been with them. So
I've
when I
watched it.
started in 2012, I think we were 11 employees and a little over $1 million operating budget. Now we're 70 employees and pushing somewhere between 30 and $40 million this year. And yeah, so it's been rewarding, challenging, amazing, all the things.
Are you making a film right now?
I've got several films in the hopper. I just finished two different films that are going to be in our CalTrout Film Festival, which is coming up.
Ooh. Oh,
For a
where is
number of
that
years,
showing?
we've done,
Only in California? What are the details there so people who are listening can attend if they want to?
yeah, as outreach events in the past, we had done hosted fly fishing film tour shows and I have four shows after that. And then this year we decided, with having an on-staff filmmaker and leveraging some of my contacts with other filmmakers and stuff to just do our own film festival that is more centered around just California. So I just completed one film about the Klamath Dam removals. It's all from the perspective of our native partners up there, mostly featuring the tribal members from the Yurok tribe and the Karuk tribe, which are two of the tribes native to the lower Klamath that fought really hard for this dam removal. And so it's all in their own words, in their own voices, the voices of the salmon people. I'm just calling it native to the Klamath, and it's really it's we're also doing working with the Yurok Construction Corporation on a large scale restoration project on a place called Oru, formerly known as Prairie Creek Mill Site. And so it ties in the restoration of the Klamath and the restoration of Prairie Creek. But to me, the overstory is this sacred obligation of stewardship. That was the theme that came up in all these interviews with these people. Is they, continually say that we made an agreement with creator that if we never take too much, we'll always have enough. And these resources were here to be used, but they need to be stewarded. And we were people, humans were put in place to help maintain the equilibrium in this ecosystem. And so it's a great message, just super awesome, and an honor to get to help tell that story, to be trusted by some of these people to help tell that story. And then I have another film coming out about the Fall River, which is more specifically about the hex hatch. We have the Hexagenia lambata, the largest mayflies in the world. And they're like these 2-inch yellow mayflies. And the hatch lasts for, 20 to 40 minutes any given night. It happens right at like a half hour after the sun goes down. So it's just at dark. And so to film this is incredibly difficult, and every time I go out to film, you get maybe 20 minutes of light to film these things. So there's a compilation of probably 6 or 7 years of going on, a couple hex trips a summer. And so that one's good. I got Val Atkinson to do some narration for me. He lives up there on Fall River. He's a famous fly fishing photographer. He's been all over the world. He was kind of
Yeah.
like the
Oh
OG
my
with
gosh.
Brian O'Keefe back in the day. I'm
I
sure you
need to
know
get him
Val.
on the show. Of course, he's great.
Yeah.
That is amazing. What a great combination.
Val's great, super good buddy. We've worked on a bunch of stuff together with CalTrout. Love that guy. So yeah, he's kind of the narrator of the film, and yeah, I got those two, and then last year I did my first narrative film. Meaning most of the stuff I've done has been kind of like environmental documentary style. So this was the first film where I actually wrote a script and hired some buddies to do some acting and got in there and actually like told a story, shot it more like, a cinematic style where there's scenes, and your, action cut, kind of deal. And still deciding what I'm gonna do with it. I like it. I mean, I think it's super, it's artistic. It's a total Tahoe story. It's a total like kind of Tahoe bro story. I mean, it really mirrors the people that are in its real lives in a lot of ways. So it's kind of, but it's loosely about a guy whose father passes away unexpectedly, and he's kind of grappling with that loss, and he's kind of depressed and struggling for some meaning in his life. Kind of starts falling apart, and he finds his dad's old fishing journal in his study, and he becomes obsessed with finding this spot on this map that his dad had written about a place to catch steelhead. And so he becomes obsessed with catching a fly on a swung, catching a steelhead on a swung fly. And so he goes on this journey. And yeah, I won't get too deep into the plot, but
Is it a full-length movie?
it's a half hour. I didn't quite go full length. Similar themes as I saw that Mending the Line film came out on Netflix, which was, it's like, man, no one has like actually told a story in fly fishing in so long. Everybody does these like bros gone fishing, and the interviews are like, well, and then we got out of the helicopter and saw how clear the water was, and we knew we were gonna have a great day. High five, and then we caught some rad fish, and then back at the lodge we talked about all those rad fish we caught. It's just like, I don't know, I just kind of got bored with that, so I want to tell a story. And so it's gritty, it's kind of raw, it's got a twist ending to it. And yeah, it's a little more like, it's not so much of a happy feel good story as it is like a story of uh more kind of like real life, like not all stories end happy,
It's true. Yeah.
it's not all about like, you know, paying a bunch of money and going on a sick fishing trip and slapping fives. It's like this guy's like coping with this grief, and it was kind of, it was tough one for me because I wrote this script, and it started as all the classic cliches from every steelhead trip. Oh, if my girlfriend ever breaks up with me, I'll be living in a tent in Humboldt County. If I didn't have to go back to work, I would just stay here all winter. You go on a steelhead trip and you're like, dude, I don't want to leave. This is so awesome up here. I don't want to go home. And so I kind of like started writing down little notes after steelhead trips, and then I came up with the father passing away as kind of like this through line. And then one thing led to another, and right when I kind of started to make the film, my dad was killed unexpectedly in a motorcycle crash.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. I did not know that.
Yeah, and so I kind of became that guy that was, going through it. And so the movie actually kind of became a way for me to help deal with some of my own grief, and gave me like some purpose to go, work on this thing, and incorporate some of my best friends, and yeah, so I did that film. Again, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I'll probably release it online or do some showings here. Just I'm so busy with real work stuff that the side fun projects. Again, it's one of those things. I make these movies, and then at the end of it, I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this thing. I enjoy making it. Now I got to find a way to market it somehow. But yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
I think that's part of the beauty though, because the wonderful thing about that is that it keeps you focused, right? When you have to start figuring out how to make money out of it, then your brain can get muddled. So at least this keeps you in a creative space.
Yeah, that's what I've tried to stay focused on throughout. Is the creativity, the reason that I love doing it, which to me is just spending time outdoors, the church of Mother Nature, the river church, and trying to convey that deep gratitude that I get, and that feeling I get, and that's what I hope comes through is just kind of that authentic, real curiosity and just love of fish and of nature and of rivers. And yeah, it's been a journey. I can't believe I'm still producing fishing media, in one form or another, but it's also awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for you? We'll start to wrap it up because we're hitting that time. But what's next for
Yeah.
you? What's on your
Y-
list?
You
I mean, that,
know,
that, that you want to share besides
yeah,
getting
just
married.
just got engaged. We got a marriage pending, which
Uh-huh.
is gonna, take place on a river, of course. And yeah, I'm gonna keep doing conservation stuff in one form or another. I'm the main thing, well, a big thing in my life here is I've through all these connections and just through guiding, through a client that I've met through guiding, and one thing led to another, and I ended up going in with another guy and buying this property on the Yuba River. And so we bought 65 acres. It's right below a dam, and so all the salmon and steelhead stack up, at our property. So it's one of the last best habitats in the Central Valley for spring run Chinook salmon, one of really five viable habitats in the entire Central Valley for springers. We also have a lot of fall run Chinook, and then we have Central Valley steelhead, one of the best self-sustaining wild populations of Central Valley steelhead in the valley right now, which are on the threatened, listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And we also have green sturgeon in the river. And so I'm actively managing this property as a preserve. It's open to catch and release fly fishing. I'm not doing anything commercially with it currently. Just kind of friends and family. Eventually, I'd like to open it up to like a meeting space, maybe do some weddings down here, corporate retreats, yoga retreats, wellness retreats, spirituality retreats, stuff like that, where people can come and kind of take in the essence of this place without taking from it. So I'm trying to turn that corner of 170 plus years of extraction legacy. There was a ton of gold mining that happened here. Historically there was a Native American village here, and then the gold rush happened and it got pretty well annihilated. And then the guy before me had an aggregate business here where he was selling rock out of the river for a lot of years. And so there's a history of degradation that we're trying to turn the corner from. And really, it's kind of the culmination of, again, just all the work that I put into fisheries conservation, and now getting this amazing opportunity to, in real time, steward a piece of property and enhance this piece of property. We're working on a large scale restoration design for the creek behind my house, which is a great habitat for both fall and spring run Chinook. But there's a lot of problems there caused by the gold mining and aggregate extraction that need to be addressed. So just a little bit of restoration can really help bolster that habitat. And so it's everything kind of coming full circle. It's like kind of the difference between the Yvon Chouinard approach and the Doug Tompkins approach. For years, I was doing kind of the Yvon Chouinard approach where I'm working a job and contributing to restoration. And, the flip side of that's the Doug Tompkins has said the only way to really protect the ecosystem is to buy it and, restore it and keep it not developed and allow space for natural process, for ecosystem services, the foundation of life on this planet, the building blocks of all life, everything that's tangible on this planet can be traced back to the natural processes of this planet. And so now I get to, help steward a piece of property in real time and restore it and preserve its ecological values and its, natural heritage a little bit too.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. You've really done well. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
You met me. I was still like little, goggle tan snowboard bro from Tahoe trying to, make it happen with a video camera and a fishing rod. And so it is
And you did. You made it
come a,
happen.
come a long way. Yeah.
Yeah. When do I get to see you next? Where are you going? Are you going to be around?
Gosh, let's meet in New Zealand.
Yes. Oh my, you know what? You could do a film around your family and what you knew about Chinook back then, what you know about Chinook in California now. Come back, check out the fishery here. It's a really interesting point of discussion here in New Zealand. I know the people to introduce you to. Just let me know if you ever want to meet up there.
Yeah, I would let my brother actually just got back from 3 weeks in New Zealand. He's got two teenage boys, and they went on a little road trip. His oldest is 18. He's graduating from high school soon, and so they went on and it was my brother's 50th birthday party, so they went on a classic New Zealand road trip, and they invited me to go, but I just couldn't pull it off this year. So I haven't been back to NZ in a while now, but I would love to get back down there soon. I'd love to take my partner down there too and show her around some of the places that, were important to us as a family.
Definitely. Did you get your citizenship when you were younger, or was it
I
just,
I did, yeah. Yeah, so I got the dual citizenship, yeah.
that means that you basically, so if you're I think, a New Zealand citizen, you have rights in Australia as well. So
Yeah,
you
I
have
think all
America, New
Commonwealth.
Zealand. Yeah, well, not necessarily. It's not quite that clean with Canada and Australia, but yeah,
Well,
definitely New Zealand, Australia.
at one point with the New Zealand citizenship, you could at least go work in most
That's right.
Commonwealth companies for a certain amount of time.
Yep.
But yeah, I always say it's kind of my like get out of America free card if, things really go bad here. California's got its share of problems, but it's also just one of the most amazing pieces of real estate on planet Earth. And, it has provided a lot of amazing opportunities for my life. And so it's a hard place to leave once you have a foothold here. But my brother really wants to buy some land in New Zealand and, just have a little peace down there, and maybe we could come back and forth a little bit more. And I would love to spend more time down there for sure.
Yep. Well, it was great to catch up with you. I'll let you get back to your night and your family, but so good to see you. That's been way overdue.
Yeah, yeah, it has. It has. It's great to see your face and see you're doing so well and follow your adventures and your family and seeing all your still getting out on the water with the gals and yeah, I love it. I
Nothing's
love it.
changed.